Hello and welcome to another episode of Automation Layering Masterclass. My name is Fred Vallaeys. I'm your host for this show. I'm also CEO and co-founder at Optmyzr, the PPC tool management company. For today's episode, we have Joey Bidner from Bidner Search Marketing Agency. And he is interesting because for a long time, he liked to run campaigns manually. And he didn't really believe in automation, or he didn't see the value in automation that much. But recently, with all of the AI coming out and just the way that PPC and marketing is shifting, Joey took another look, and we're going to hear about his path from being fairly manual to having added automation to his workflows. So, with that, let's get rolling with this episode.
Hey, Fred.
Hey, Joey, thanks for coming on and sharing with people kind of what your path has been. But before we go into that, tell folks a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a Google Ads freelancer. So I manage a lean list of small and large clients and focus solely on Google Ads. So that's everything from lead gen to e-com, YouTube display, feed management, everything related to just Google Ads. And my background, like I got started in the agency world and had a nice long run working at agencies, a few different ones. And my reason for switching over to freelance was what excited me about PPC was using cutting edge strategies and moving quickly as the environment moves around us. And working at agencies at times can be a bit slow. And you have to wait for the agency to approve those new campaign types, or you can only move as fast as your team sometimes. And I really like to dig into the weeds of things, try new cutting edge stuff. Um, so I left a number of years ago as a freelancer, and it's been great because of that flexibility and ability to change workflows, try new things. And yeah, and that brings us to where we are today of trying automations.
Nice. Yeah, and so that's a story that I think we hear quite a bit, right? So at an agency, often the playbook is take an existing methodology, which could be an amazing best practice, but then try to deploy it and scale it across many clients. And that's how you make your money. And then when we work with in-house teams, it seems like they always kind of want to push the envelope and do something a little bit more custom, a little bit more different, and try that new thing. But I understand we're in an agency where there's sort of that playbook that you need to stick to make things efficient. It can be harder to be allowed to push a little bit further afield. And I guess that was your initial drive too, then, for manual management, right? Because you didn't want to be boxed in by what a tool allows you to do. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so back then when I was at the agency world, they were pushing the automated bidding strategies, which at the time were not as good as they are now. Like now, we'll get into that, but I do love a lot of those in-platform automations because they've gotten a lot better. But years ago, we were really able to, unlevel the playing field, as some may say, when when by really deep diving into data, making manual adjustments, very nerdy, deep level tweaks of bid adjustments and all this stuff. And at the time, like that was what I really wanted to do, but agencies kind of they weren't really for it for a number of reasons. So um, to get back to your question though, yeah, at the time that worked really well, and I was really excited about that type of management. But as things kind of change, not just with bid management styles, but also campaign types, that's where we're faced at another precipice of it's time to learn this new tool and deploy it. And you can't always do that off the cuff within an agency. So I've been really enjoying the process as a freelancer of learning these cutting edge strategies and having the ability to come to a client and say, hey, do you want to try this? And I think that is a big part of trying something new is having the right type of client to um, run with it and picking the right instances to really test things. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and so you obviously you end up hitting some limits, right? If you're doing things manually and trying these new strategies. So when you started looking at tools, like was any of this driven by the new wave of generative AI, or what kind of sort of pushed you to maybe start going through that transition?
So yeah, fast forwarding to now, I think there's a big difference as well when looking at the automation tools within the platform and then automation tools outside of the platform. And my
Mhm.
drive to using automation tools outside of the platform came from specific questions that I had. So I'll give you an example. One situation that I really turned to Optmyzr for example, was I've got um, a lot of different accounts with different ad spends, right? And when you have, let's say, an account with a very large ad spend versus one with very small, you're running tests in both. When you have a client that's got a very small ad spend, you often need to let that test run for quite a bit longer before you can really evaluate its effectiveness, right? So because it's like, okay, I need to give this, let's say, a month before I can really evaluate if that test works, you're not in that account as much day to day, right? And in that time period where maybe I'm giving time for data to mature, I still want eyes on the account. Those bigger accounts, you're in there every day. You notice when there's a little fluctuation, right? But those smaller accounts where you're waiting for some data to mature, you're not in there every day. So you might miss that little um, hiccup or change in data. Maybe a new player came in, CPCs change, you're no longer serving as you were. So, I've been using Optmyzr, for example, to set up some alerts, and I've been really enjoying the alert functionalities where I can layer in something that says, okay, look at the last 2 weeks of data based on a particular KPI, compare it to the previous 2 weeks of data, and notify me when there is a 50% drop in that KPI. And then that allows me to just have some safeguards in place for that in between time where I'm not in the account every day. So that was my first kind of reason to go into using some of these platforms. And then once you go in, you realize, oh my goodness, there is so much to do and try. And I'm at a process now where I'm figuring out which questions need to be answered. And also, I think an important part of this as well is not necessarily feeling like you need to do everything all at once, right? You don't
Mhm.
need to have every automation layer. You don't need to have every alert. You can get easily overwhelmed. So I think my approach has been a bit of a slower one where I'm taking it at that kind of question by question basis of, okay, I've got this problem. What can I use to solve it? And being willing to kind of learn what's out there to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. Now that's fascinating, right? So because you basically talked about in-platform bid automation, which is at this point more or less a given. It's quite hard not to use that given the context of sure you don't have to automate your bids, but broad match is so broad that you really want some sort of automated bidding to make sure that it's not overspending on these crazy broad matches that you can't really control that well anymore. And so, as you've been forced to adapt your management style, you're basically putting in place these safeguards so that the automation, and by the way, like the automations from Google, like they are fundamentally built to help Google investors, right? And the stock price needs to head in one direction. And obviously, I mean, I was at Google before, so I don't think they're an evil company, and I think they have the heart in the right place in most cases. And so, and they also very well understand that if you give an advertiser horrendous results, well, they're going to leave and they're going to go find a different ad platform to be on. And so that's not good for anyone. But, if you can squeeze that extra 1 or 2% out of them by, maybe being a little bit more broad or having a little bit more of an aggressive bid, like they're probably going to do that type of stuff as well. And that's where it's nice, I think, to have someone like Joey or someone else on your account who's got your back, right? Has your best incentive in mind. But like you said, it's not always possible. Like there's only so many. Well, there's 24 hours in a day, but there's only so many hours that we can be looking at accounts. And for me, that was like the discovery of scripts. It was like, wow, now I can look every single hour, and like even if something's a little bit off for that 1 hour, I can get a notification.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
I've also been enjoying kind of exploring the world of scripts, and there's a lot of amazing resources out there and people who are really willing to share their scripts. There's a whole great community of these, yeah, tools that you can like implement that can answer a question that you didn't even know there was an answer to, that you thought you had to do manually and always check. So I've been really
right.
enjoying that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even like, oh, that's a question I didn't know I should have asked. Not just the answer is unknown, but it's like, oh, wow, that's an interesting way to explore the data.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, is there any like particular script that lately has stood out to you?
So a lot of the ones that I've been using, to be honest, they're quite simple. Like a lot of the most effective ones I find are the simple ones. Like for example, one of the things that I find Merchant Center doesn't have the greatest notification system. Or if you're
Mhm.
at any point tired of getting a lot of really useless notifications, you turn it off and then you don't get the important ones. So I've been finding just like product disapproval script. There's a really good one from Nils. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name.
Your
Um,
Froymans?
yeah, and he's got a really simple script that just runs, obviously whatever frequency you want, and it sends you an email of your disapprovals. And then what's great is that it also links you to so it tells you what it's disapproved for, and then right in that same line links you to the page, the Google literature on the information on what that disapproval is or means. And sometimes there's some weird disapprovals you might have not seen before. So it's just really helpful and gets you to where you need to go quicker, and you don't miss that disapproved product where nothing's worse than performance has dropped over the last couple of weeks. You don't really know why, then you realize, oh goodness, like the product's been disapproved for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I've
Whoops.
been really, yeah, I've been really enjoying that one. As well, some of the other big ones that I like are like the Mike Rhodes script, just for data transparency through for PMAX. That one's been really helpful for just like data insights, as well as some product segmentations for like zombie skew identification, stuff like
Mhm.
that. And he's got a paid version and a free version. I've used both. They're both great and both serve their purpose. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So, and again, it sounds like it's really a lot of monitoring and alerting and insights. Because ultimately, with the Mike Rhodes PMAX script, it basically tells you where your money is being spent in these PMAX campaigns. Now, if you want to act on that, you still have to be an expert and you still have to know what to do with that, which settings and tweaks to do.
Mhm.
Um, but when it comes to like these alerts, right? You see, you kind of alluded to the fact that Merchant Center, there's way too many alerts, so people turn them off. And this is like this alert fatigue. And there's been studies done, like in hospitals. There's so many alerts beeping at the nurses that they ended up
Mm.
tuning out some of the really important ones, and then a patient goes into cardiac arrest. And so it's like, how do you figure out like what actually matters and what needs a quick response time? PPC, a little bit less life and death, but I think it's a frustration a lot of people have. So like, what are your tips and tricks for like, or how has Optmyzr or any other tool helped you sort of like dial it in to the level that you think it gives you that insight that you wanted? And you were even talking about like 2 weeks versus 2 weeks of data. Like, so clearly you're thinking about look back windows and how do you go about all of that?
Yeah, and I think when it comes to alerts, it can be really easy to go a little bit too far. And like I'll give you an example. One thing I don't want is something alerting me based off of a daily trend, right? Like,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of alert platforms out there that let you know, oh, like today your CPC spiked to up 50%, or I don't even want to know about daily fluctuations. Those are fluctuations. I want to know about trend changes. So I find that when it comes to picking and choosing what um, kind of alerts you want, based on what kind of information you would actually take action on. There always has to be a so what moment in every piece of data that you read, right? If
Yeah.
you see a piece of data, you need to say to yourself, okay, so what? What would be the action I would take on that? On a daily fluctuation, there's often very little so what. You're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna wait till tomorrow and see if that data is the same. So I like to look at trend-based data, which is why I baked in using the rule engine on Optmyzr. I baked in a lot of those look back windows into my alerts. Um, yeah, and then when I
So it
get an
sounds like
alert,
you played
yeah,
with the custom look back window capability of Rule Engine.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll set a so I want the let's say the automation to run every week or every 2 weeks, and it's looking at these last 2 weeks compared to the 2 weeks before, and then it's only notifying me if there's like a 50% difference. I don't really care if it's a 20% difference, because again, 20% difference I consider fluctuation. Things always go up, go down, go up, go down. I want to know if there's a drop off, because that indicates that there has been a change in the landscape of some way. So then usually what I'll do is then I'll take that piece of information and then I'll go to the in Optmyzr. I love the oh, what's it called again? The P, where
The
you have that
PPC
spider chart,
investigator.
PPC
Yeah.
Investigator, where it allows you to really quickly narrow in on what's fluctuated, what's changed, and then I can take that piece of data and go back into Google Ads to do even more thorough investigation. And what I find is interesting about all this is that um, in transitioning from doing all these very manual adjustments as I used to do into using automation, it's not that the analysis is any less sophisticated. I'm still very I'm still diving into the data in a very deep way, but I'm just getting to that point of taking action much quicker. So
Yeah.
I'm moving a lot more efficiently, but still with the same level of sophistication. And I think that's where PPC is going. Crystal ball in front of me. I think that in the next few years, to be honest, I think industry-wide management pricing is going to change. And I think we're going to be expected to manage more clients for a little bit less, but with the same level of sophistication. And I, that's what I find these automations allow you to do. It's still the same level of sophistication. You're just getting to where you need to go a little bit quicker.
Right.
And that process requires an open mind to adjust to. And this is where one thing I kind of wanted to mention where I think PPC managers need to be flexible in our processes. I'll say it like Qasim Aslam always says, like we can't be romantic about our processes, right? We need to be willing to change them, and that is difficult. Like it is difficult to change something in our workflow that we know has worked so well for us. And I don't think it's wise to change too late where you're forced to. As soon as we're starting to see things shift in Google Ads, we got to say, okay, rolling up my sleeves, got to change my process a little bit, got to learn what comes in this new territory. I think that is becoming a big part of the job.
That's well said. I mean, if you're not going to change the process, then someone else is going to do it and have better results, and you're going to lose business to them, right? So it's better to cannibalize yourself than to have someone else do it. And then you're also kind of alluding to sort of like the Bidner formula. It's almost like it's your smarts and your strategies that become the secret sauce, and it's your ability, thanks to technology, to scale this and deploy it more widely.
Mm.
Um, but now we're going back a little bit to like this is more the agency model, right? So it's about having lots of clients deploying the same sort of methodology. But at some level, if that's the right strategy and the right workflow, then it is highly valuable. It is going to save advertisers a lot of wasted spend. It's going to reprioritize to what makes the most sense. It's going to make sure that the ROAS targets are tied to actual business objectives like profits, and all of that takes a lot of time. And I was going to joke at the beginning too that when you said you just do Google Ads, it's like, oh yeah, that's not much these days, right? That's just like a gajillion campaign types and 15 different systems to manage it all and bring it together. So it's some of the strategies and the ideas are simple, but the execution can be really tedious.
Oh yeah, and I think that the strategy portion that's one thing that I think is going to remain for a while. Like yeah, our workflows of button pushing is changes, but being able to understand consumer behavior and how to apply this complex platform to a specific business's needs to um, adjust and get in front of the right consumer considering that their consumer behavior, like that is the portion that no matter how much automation you have, will still require, I think, a human brain to interpret. And I just find, yeah, the automations just help us get to that decision making point a little bit quicker.
Yeah. So, what's one common PPC myth that you wish you could debunk? Like, what's one thing that people do wrong?
So this is going to be kind of a weird answer, but I think the one thing that people do wrong is think that there is like one campaign type that solves a problem. It's like every one of my clients, that they come to me, it's like, oh, should we use PMax? Should we use standard shopping? Should we use this? Should we use that? And To be honest, my answer is always any of them could work. And it's our job to test to see which works best based off of your product category, your purchase intent, like your consumer behavior. Like, I don't find that there is one formula that applies to one client. I have some clients that do amazing with feed only performance max. Other clients, even in the same kind of vertical, it just did not work because of a
Mhm.
number of reasons, right? So I think the biggest thing that people get wrong is thinking that PPC is as formulaic as it seems. And again, like, I'm gonna throw another quote out here to Chris Schaefer, another one of my favorite podcasts out there, and he always says, like, our job is to test stuff. Performance can come, it can go, but our job is to test stuff and make sure that we are never blinded by our own, call it consistent success, whatever it is. There's always something you can test against or do. Um, and yeah, I guess I'll answer it with that.
Yeah. Well, one of the thoughts in my first book, I think I put it, was that the winningest PPC advertiser is the one who's got the best process around testing. And
Yes.
like you said, I mean, there's not always one right solution. So it's a matter of how quickly can you identify the right test, because not every test is going to be the right one, right? That's where we are PPC doctors, so we can look at an account and we contextualize it against everything else we've done, and we can sort of prioritize. We can say, like, this is the most likely thing to work well for you, but we can't guarantee it. And then it's like having that process, and like you alluded to as well, like if you have a very small client, right, is it the right thing to say we're going to do this test, but it's going to take 4 months to get to an answer, because in 4 months the landscape changes, like other things change. Like, could we make this test go faster? Could we limit it in some way? Could we like pump more volume through it to so that we can make that decision, right? Because if you, I mean, too many agencies and consultants, I think, also sit on tests and they're like all happy, like, oh, look, I'm doing so many tests. It's like, oh, but how many have you concluded, or how many winning tests have you had? If you keep doing A/B test after A/B test, and 6 times in a row you've lost, well, that means that for 6 times in a row you've gotten that advertiser fewer conversions than they could have if you had just left the account alone. So doing the seventh test, is that really what you should be doing? So I love all of these ideas around testing and experimentation, and just getting really good at it. But again, I think it comes back to, like, if you don't have the right tool set, then you're just going to be hamstrung by your human ability to only look at an account so many times a day. And whereas a tool could literally go in once an hour and say, hey, Joey, this account just reached statistical significance. It's time for you to decide and move on.
Yeah, because I can also tell you quite honestly, there has been times as well where, you got to test in one account, you got to test in another account, test another account. Sometimes you kind of forget which test you ran and when you ran it, and so having some automations to just kind of ping you once in a while goes a long way. And I find that's where I'm using it the most, is especially when your client list grows and you've got so many things floating. Having good note taking is key. This is one thing that I've kind of changed my workflow on, is getting like a note taking software, like a client, like almost like client management software, and just using it for note taking, and then having all those alerts and notifications through automations to keep all those tests top of mind and reminding you on when to follow up on them. And yeah, giving things the maturing time that they need is so key. And just like you said, like, there's nothing worse than a short-lived test just to kind of show your client you're doing tests. I'll often say, if a test needs a couple months and they're thinking, oh, what am I paying you for if you just let it sit for a couple months? Like, yeah, you're paying me to not touch anything, because a poor manager will go in, try to feel busy, mess a bunch of stuff up while a test is running, where that's, our job isn't but button pushing, it's insightful long-term action, right?
Right.
Or yeah, yeah.
Well, and that's where the workflow is so important too, because I think Google actually does not do a very good job of uh, preventing you from invalidating a test and polluting the
Mm,
data. And so it's too easy for someone to go into an account and be like, oh, yeah, there's a cool negative keyword suggestion, or that's like a valid bit change. And then you go and make it. And it's like, oh, well, that was your control. And now you've mucked up your control. And when you have to decide, it's like, it's no longer apples to apples, right? So And then your other point about note taking, I love too, because Google, the way that they in the campaign experiment setup, it's very difficult to fully describe what is this test about in the name, so that later on you're going to actually remember it. Um, because me too. I mean, I look at accounts and I'm like, oh yeah, we did a test in there 2 years ago, and this one, but like, what was that? Like, did we add keywords? Did we change the ad text? Was it a budget thing? Like, I don't know. And so if you have a good note keeping tool or other technology, you can really have your back in those cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, what's your favorite AI tool?
AI in terms of like generative.
Sure, generative or old school, but generative is more the topic on top of mind for most people, I suppose.
Yeah, when it comes to AI tools, to be honest, I don't use them all that much yet. I mean, I use, ChatGPT to help with ad copywriting, stuff like that. I'm not as sophisticated in the AI tool use,
Mhm.
full disclosure. Yeah, I use ChatGPT to help with ad copywriting, but that's pretty much it right now.
Cool. And yeah, Chat or OpenAI's GPT is built into Optmyzr as well. So if you want a quicker path to getting some headline suggestions, description line suggestions, we also have what we call the sidekick. So you can have a conversation about your account. And one thing that's nice as a consultant is you can say, hey, put a happy spin on like how this account is doing, and then you copy paste that, give it to the client to showcase how great you are, and then you turn around and you ask the same assistant, but now tell me what I should work on so that next month I can have another happy conversation with the client. And then it tells you everything that's broken and that you should be fixing. So
Very cool.
yeah.
See, I didn't even know that some of those functions were built into Optmyzr. So there we go. This is already helpful
Yeah.
for me.
Wow, great. No, and it's one of these weird things, right? Because like, do you want to slap labels across every part of the tool and be like, "Hey, look, we're cool. This is Chat GPT do it, helping you do this,"
Right.
versus it's like, well, we are a tool that helps you amongst other things with ad generation. So like, it makes sense that we're going to have some generative AI in that. And
Hmm.
so we used more old school. um, we'd look throughout the campaign, and if you had a specific ad group, we'd say like, look, here's a headline that you've used inside this campaign that had really good performance. Maybe consider it for this new ad group or this new ad text where you need to put it in, right? But then over time it was like, well, generative can come up with some more creative things, so now you have kind of like that choice as an advertiser. And we just propose like, here's 10 headlines using different methodologies, and then you pick what makes sense and make it really easy. But like electricity is fundamental to using Optmyzr, like GPT and generative. It's baked in and it's part of the tool.
Just following up on one thing that you said in terms of the system bringing up suggestions and stuff, that is one functionality that I do really like, where it will bring you. I think it's in, I forget which section it's in the platform, but it'll show you search terms that you should consider, right? So a lot of the times, especially with keywords, and how match types have changed, even if you're using phrase and exact, you can still get search terms that pop up that you know it, that you should consider on if it's something you want to negative or include. Now, I am hesitant to layer in automations to automatically add in keywords of high performing search terms. I'm kind of not for those, but just those automations that will just say, hey, here's a search term that's currently not one of your keywords that is getting a lot of clicks right now. Do you maybe
Mhm.
want to do an n-gram analysis of it, or do you want to? So I am using some tools. I know Optmyzr offers a similar version to that. I am using some other tools as well that regularly kind of brings those to the surface, and they're just nice to glance through. I don't even take action on all of them. Sometimes, it's not worth negativing, it's not worth adding. It's just okay, like that keyword is triggering these kind of search terms. Maybe it
Right.
gives you a bit of insight into the consumer behavior, or it does prompt an action of adding or excluding. But I am
Yeah.
enjoying those kinds of automatic, just awareness driven automations.
Yeah, and that was a big philosophy around when we built Optimizer, was like, we didn't want to be the tool that did everything for you, because there's so much trust you have to have, and it's so difficult for a tool to be like, think like you do. I mean, you think differently than another account manager. So like, how do we replicate that? We can't. And this whole idea came out of it's like it's human plus machine, right? The machine's job is to flag and highlight things that might be worth your attention. And then you, as the human expert who has actually talked to that client, I mean, you might understand some nuance around like, yeah, it's a great keyword, great volume, but maybe it's a brand competitor and they have some sort of agreement and like you could not add that, right? You will know about that. And then we also did things in like Rule Engine where we'll flag high opportunity search terms. And then we baked in something called the Levenstein distance calculator. So like what's the similarity of that keyword to the search term? And so if it's something like a typo, generally that Levenstein distance will be very close. So there's only 2 or 3 characters difference. And then we might very well say, well, then just add it. Okay. It's probably not a high risk new keyword to add. But if the Levenstein distance, the number of characters is much larger, then yeah, it could be a new topic. And then it's something like you said to look at. Maybe there's some change in consumer behavior, some new thing they're searching for, which is relevant, but it would actually benefit from not just being a new keyword, but just being a new ad group. With some new ad text related to that, maybe a different landing page, how you even communicate it on the landing page, right? So it opens up all these new opportunities and makes you look like the hero when you go to the client area. Like, hey, did you guys know that blah 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 keyword is like up 300%, and you don't have a landing page for that? Look, I'm actually helping you get your products in line with what consumers want.
Yeah, and it's that kind of quick access to that data that makes you that you end up seeing those insights more often, especially when you have a a large client list. Because again, like of course, search term analysis, like digging through the search term report, is something that's in my workflow that I do regularly, right? But again, sometimes there's certain accounts where you might not do that over a period of time, and having a dashboard where it just highlights those key things that maybe require a little bit of attention. You don't need to dig through 1,000 search terms. It's just like, here's a couple that might be interesting to you. Awesome, right? It takes 2 seconds to look at. You can act or not. It just keeps your eyes on things with little investment of um, a deep dive into the account.
Mhm.
And I find you kind of need both. Like, there's times when I'll personally schedule like an account overview of a certain thing, right? Go into Google Ads and I dig through all kinds of stuff. But I'm not doing that as regularly, like not doing that weekly. You know what I mean? I'm doing that every once in a while, and then I'm keeping tabs on things through these platforms like Optmyzr, keeping tabs on everything. So my eyes are still on it, but it's showing me just the things I need to see semi regularly, right?
Yeah. Hey, well, Joey, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of our viewers. So this has been an automation layering masterclass. If you enjoy these and want to hear from more experts and how they use tools and automation, please subscribe. If you enjoyed hearing from Joey, please give him a like and this video a like. Joey, how do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more or maybe even hire you as a freelancer?
Yeah, I mean, add me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm kind of constantly just sharing the things that I learn on LinkedIn, as well my website, joeybidner.com. But yeah, be happy to chat if anybody needs some help or just wants to talk about Google Ads.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us and thanks for watching.
My pleasure.